Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest on our talk stage is David Johnson from Venza, and he's talking about data protection and third-party risk management. David, welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's Daniel. And it's funny you said David, because we've got a couple of Davids in the company. You're prescient. You saw that in the future. Yeah, so we've got a couple of other D folks at Venza, but I am the Daniel of the D crowd. So let's jump right into this. Thank you for being here, everyone. Data protection, not necessarily always the topic that people are screaming to talk about, and certainly not the kind of thing that a lot of people want to wake up in the morning to discuss. But nonetheless, it's pretty important stuff. We at Venza think it's pretty important, and I don't think we're necessarily alone on that front. So let's jump right into it and see what we're talking about today. What we've broken down for you is a look at the top 5 threats for hospitality as it applies to data protection. So we're starting with the first threat here, ransomware. Perhaps not something that people are necessarily new to them, but just the extent of ransomware and its threat to the industry is underestimated. It's a current threat. So ransomware, for those that are new to the data protection industry and what some of these terms are, ransomware is a type of malware from cryptovirology that threatens to publish the victim's data or perpetually block access to it unless a ransom is paid. Pretty simple, right? It is not a new thing, but it is definitely on the rise. Now, it is very much a current threat. It is the biggest threat to the hospitality industry with regards to for data protection. Previous years, the issue had been intrusions to the point of sale. And so there's a quote from the DBIR Verizon report from 2020. The intrusions from point of sale has plummeted. That's great news. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we've done a much better job of integrating our point of sale systems and identifying vulnerabilities with patches to POSs and making sure that the credit card environment is appropriately secured. So the efforts of PCI DSS across hospitality has been largely a success story in helping to decrease the risk to the point of sale. But what that has meant is that the adversaries, as we call them, the hackers, the cyber criminals, have decided to focus their attention on ransomware. And the COVID pandemic has been a real boon for the attackers, and there has been an increase by 72% of ransomware attacks. So it is an astonishingly frightening proposition. How to mitigate this? We have a very human resources centric industry. So it's labor intensive, lots of people involved in order to provide the goods and services that they expect from a hotel visit. Those people frequently have access to that information, and making sure that they're aware of their role as a data protection guard is important. Just on the side note, a lot of times hackers, thieves utilize the hospitality nature of people in hospitality against us. So what I mean is people in the hotel business want to be hospitable, want to give access, want to share, want to be communicative, probably more so than any other industry. And that is an aspect of the kind of way of being in hospitality that the hackers like to take advantage of. So making them aware that their role, their being staff, associates, their role in guarding data is an important role, is ever so important. You can do that through training, events. You can do group training events, make it part of your pre-shift meeting, or online modules, e-learning modules, that kind of thing, videos. Making it a part of your overall corporate communications is very important. Also, something that can be very useful are phishing simulations that are tied into your training. For example, you can do either clandestine phishing simulations where people are phished and they don't even know they're being phished. Or you could do an educational training phishing simulation where if they were to succumb to the bait, open up the attachment, click on the link, it actually launches a training module. So those are things to drive home the fact of what has occurred at that point. So phishing simulations, a very, very important point, a very important tool in any awareness program. Also, how to mitigate this threat: advanced email protection. Long are the days where the kind of McAfee email blocker is sufficient, but a multi-layered protection that involves that can identify patterns, can identify a range of different assaults that goes well beyond just your typical kind of firewall blocking or the kind of thing that you might get from your Microsoft package. That second paragraph there kind of warrants some attention. Link protection rewrites all links to safe versions and performs time-of-click analysis on the destination address. I'm going to stop there for a second just to point out something that the hackers utilize, not a lot of people are aware of. Frequently, in order to get through email protection, threat protection programs, you can have a situation where a hacker will include a link, and that link, in order to pass through, may be to a benign location, so there wouldn't be any kind of alarm that is launched. However, hackers work around that by changing the links afterwards, so once it has passed through that system. So link protection is it makes sure that if there has been an attempt to change that link, it won't be opened, and make sure that it is only to the safe versions at the time of click. So that's there are tools that are out there that can really help reduce the damage to ransomware. And on average, ransomware attacks can take up to 24 days to resolve. So that is taking your organization, your people, offline for a substantial period of time. 3 weeks is a long time for your organization to be somewhat hamstrung because of a ransomware attack. So you want to avoid that. Also, another way to mitigate ransomware is endpoint protection. This is ever so important, the idea of endpoint protection, as we look to a new model of the workplace. If you've got people on your support teams that are working off-site, so remote management of those endpoints, ever so important, so that you can monitor what is happening with each and every node that is part of your network, that accesses your network. Another way to mitigate ransomware, the effects of ransomware, is making sure that you have adequate backups. So backup full systems so quickly and recover from IT disasters. So if you were to have a situation, have a ransomware attack, and everything is closed off, they're holding off your data, you can bypass their efforts by simply having an adequate backup. It is not the ideal. You want to make sure that you are avoiding that ransomware attack in the front end, but should it happen, having a backup at the ready is ever so important. Okay, moving on to this very dire list of threats. So threat number 2, data loss and exfiltration. So what is the definition of that? Data exfiltration happens when data is illicitly transferred outside an organization. It can happen manually. So an example might be a user transferred data over the internet, or puts it on a portal device, on a physical device, or automatically with some malware infection. So the danger is there, how to mitigate it. So you can have a security incident and event management system in place, intrusion detection and prevention solutions, who can log any kind of movement of data. If you have a large amount of data that just happens to be moving from a node in your front desk or in your back office, moving from one location to another, you want to be able to, you want to see that, you want to know that, and you want to shut it down before data is removed. So that, having those logs after the fact is maybe good for forensics, but you want to stop it in its tracks, and that's what a SIM can do for you. Advanced email protection, so a lot of data exfiltration through an email program. So getting back to the importance of thwarting a ransomware attack, also data exfiltration. So protect against loss of personal, financial, or other sensitive information using data loss prevention functionality in your email protection program. So a lot of times you have a lot of important data being shared by email. Here in Europe, estimates are that booking of hotel rooms, 50% still done by email. And in those emails, frequently, they're seeing important personal data, financial data, credit card information, names, addresses, names of the children that are also joining the family at the property. So making sure that you've got advanced email protection to avoid data exfiltration. And then advanced endpoint protection. So this is, again, not something that hoteliers had been able to entertain in years previous. It was kind of the gold standard, be able to control it right at the endpoint. In the past, it has been kind of on-premise, firewall, block it at the firewall, and hope that all is well. Endpoint protection had been a very costly endeavor for organizations, but it's the tools that are out there can make it a very attractive thwarting mechanism for hoteliers, and can really isolate issues right there at that endpoint. So making sure those critical assets are not being accessed. And also another way to mitigate data loss exfiltration is encryption. So all sensitive and personal information encrypted in transit or at rest. So anything that might fall under personal information under the GDPR or under PCI DSS, that's the data security standards of the PCI industry. These items, if they are properly encrypted, you can reduce the value of that data and thereby making it less of a liability to your organization. Threat number 3 in our dubious list of problems: lack of patch management. So outdated software and firmware is an incredible threat, and it is something that is so. It can be, it's very low tech, managing your patches, and at the same time, it can be very laborious. Many data breaches are the result of outdated software, operating systems, and firmware. Makes reference to the Equifax data breach there. I just want to point out to the industry, one of the big challenges we'll very likely face in the coming year is our supply chain gluck right now. The situation with supply chain, the ability to access updated systems, updated hardware, with shipping industry being hamstrung by the ability to bring in new containers full of hardware, and everyone's likely heard of the challenges around component parts and machines. So the access to these machines, to the new machines, to the updates, to antiquated hardware is going to make it very difficult for organizations to make sure that their systems have been patched. If you've got old systems, if you've got a firewall that is 7, 8 years old, you maybe have been able to update its patch it, and make sure that it is still functioning. But if you have outdated hardware and you cannot patch it, you're at a considerable vulnerability there. So this is gonna play out. It's not the sexiest subtopic, but it is the idea that your machines cannot be patched, and so therefore you've got these gaping holes and vulnerabilities. Machines that you could have patched before, but maybe have been outdated. And as we're gathering more and more technology, the tech stack grows in complexity, you have a greater need to make sure that all your software is up to date, and that security is maintained. So it is a big threat. There's a typo there. 20,000 new vulnerabilities predicted for 21 rather than 2020. A 50% increase in mobile vulnerabilities. So as we look towards mobile, we are looking towards a greater degree of vulnerability, simply maintaining those patches to the software. So patch management is the process of distributing and applying updates to software and hardware. These patches are often necessary to correct vulnerabilities that may be exploited. The gold standard is to patch within 30 days of release. Many of the other conversations we've been having here throughout today's conference is got to innovate. How do you innovate? We're too busy doing other things. How do you find time to innovate, to keep heads in beds, make sure that people are still satisfied with the guest experience, but within 30 days, make sure you are affecting those patches? It is a challenge. It is a time commitment, and it is a task that is very rarely something that people are cheered on because they went and updated on patches. It is a behind-the-scenes task, doesn't get a lot of attention, but it is so important to the organization to make sure that those patches are done. So you can outsource it. You can look for other groups that can help you with your patch management. Threat number 4 or 5, so we're 80% into our list: lack of business continuity and disaster recovery. Okay, so disaster recovery is disaster control. Business continuity is a sizable concern. Earlier today, we were on the tech stack panel, and there was near unanimity on the panel about the importance of moving to the cloud. I was the one contrarian because we do have a lot of customers that do require things to be still on premise. Why? They may be operating a resort in an area that frequently is struck by hurricanes, for example, or other things where they would need to be able to operate offline. Taking into consideration what your business continuity needs are is super important. So holistically looking at how the organization runs and being able to plan for what we don't know will happen. Forecasting, all the questions around forecasting, whether it be in revenue management, guest trends, always a challenge. Don't know what's around the corner. Since we don't know, prepare for the worst. Expect the best or hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So business continuity planning, ever so important, and mitigate whatever impact might come from a disaster, whether that be a health disaster, a political issue, climate-related. Make sure that the planning is done in advance. So components may include virtual disaster recovery, the ability to test recovery images, exchange database restores, Exchange server recovery, continuous recovery. Be involved in your business continuity planning. Important steps, security itself is growing more difficult as our tech stack grows in complexity and as each organization is looking to offload or outsource some of the roles, whether it be from IT staffing or whether it be off-site partners. It's important to have an oversight into the entire security of the organization and be able to plan against that. Don't outsource your strategy. Look to have CISO services and advisory services available, looking at your best interest. Don't just take the vendor's word for it. One of the things over the years with regards to PCI DSS, a lot of hoteliers say, well, I don't have to worry about PCI DSS because my PMS vendor is PCI compliant. That's great for your PMS vendor, but you're a merchant. You're a merchant. You need to be PCI compliant. We heard the same story with GDPR. Well, all my vendors are GDPR compliant. That's great. They are the data processors, but the hotelier is the data controller. So make sure that you are overseeing your entire organization's needs and have that strategy in-house, looking at the entire organization. A little back in 2019, the main cause of business disruption was unplanned IT or telecommunications outages. So do not let that upset your organization moving forward. Threat number 5, third-party management. So all of this is kind of leading right into that topic of third-party management as we look to that tech stack growing in complexity, as we're looking more and more to outsourcing, so that reducing payroll concerns and utilizing a much more streamlined approach to doing business in hospitality. Third-party management never been more important. The current threat, third parties are organizations with whom you process data or the process data on your behalf. For each and every supplier, you must determine the risk. Over 50% of breaches are caused by third-party organizations. So when we look at the very complexity of a hotel tech stack and all of the systems that are plugged into that hotel tech stack, knowing where our third-party concerns are, we want to make sure that we mitigate that. How to mitigate the threat? Really 3 components. Documentation. Understand the legality of the data processing activity. So a lot of conversations here have been about GDPR. What is your legal basis for processing that data? Is it to fulfill on a contract? That's great. If it's not fulfilling on that contract for that guest stay, then why are you processing that data? So understanding the purpose behind it. You don't necessarily have to, it doesn't have to be to fulfill the contract, but you have to have a reasonable understanding and a legal basis for processing that data. So be very clear on the purpose and document the security measures that you and your organization or your third-party partner is taking. Too frequently, we are in an industry where we love to work with somebody that we know. That's great. You want to work with somebody that you have built a relationship with. But sometimes those long-term relationships, some of those established businesses, they may not be thinking about security. The ability for an organization to provide strong security to the hotel is certainly a competitive advantage for that organization. So having that documentation, asking for that documentation, what are you doing for security? We want to see it. Don't just take their word for it. Clarification, make sure you know what your role is, what their role is. In the case of an incident, have it documented. Who's doing what and when. And what security processes will you take place, will you follow through. And then don't just set and rest. Don't just invest and rest in your conversations with your vendors. Monitor. Look for, understand what their risk mitigation strategies are and what are their incident responses. Do not just wait and hope that they have taken care of something if something were to happen, and you don't want to hear about your vendor in the news after they've had a security incident. You want to have an open communication line of communication and be at the ready for that. So ever so important on that front. And just a little statistic there. Even the least effective program, data protection program, has a 7-fold ROI. Even the least effective. So, like so many other comments in some of the other panel discussions, make an effort. You don't have to create Fort Knox. You don't have to create the most secure organization on the planet. Make some small steps, and you will be able to realize a business benefit for you. That's it for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It seems that we do have a lot of homework to do, except for all the other steps in digitalization. I know that Dominic wants to answer a question to you, so I hand over the mic.
Well, again, not a question really. I just love to talk also. No, just beside of course that's because of course from the outside it looks a bit like theory, you know, that all this stuff could happen. But in our example, we had one client that was a victim of a ransomware attack, also not directly, but they had a kind of provider that was ensuring the access for third parties to their servers. And this bridge, so this kind of professional company, you know, that got some kind hacked, and so they could attack all the servers they were providing this service to, that other IT companies could access their servers. And that means for the hotel that the hotel didn't have anything function, so they didn't know who was arriving the day. They couldn't issue any invoices. They couldn't do anything. Yeah? So for some days they couldn't charge any customer. And they really didn't know who's coming, which room will you get, because everything was blocked from the last 3 days. And I think it took them a week or something to get a backup running that was free of the ransomware, so that at least then they could get it in. But it was, of course, well, I think the most stressful situation that the hotel had in operations. It was in main season, so it was an high season.
Yeah, and it's a kind of issue that has it's a 1-2 punch, right? So if you were to have a ransomware and that type of situation, and you aren't able to realize revenue for those few days, that's bad. That's a hit, right? That's a sock in the gut. But then the left cross, you know, is the fact that then you're dealing with the reputational damage. Will those guests want to come back? Wait, you had what happened? I mean, how secure is this place? Do I want to do business with this organization again? And they tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends. The reputational damage is if not equally, you know, nearly as bad. So, yeah, you want to be in the papers because people are having a great guest experience. You don't want to be in the papers because you've not secured your organization.
That's actually a great closing for making sure that data protection is key for securing your business and also your public relations for your company, so the reputation of your hotel. Yeah. Daniel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.